last meeting. Then we need to elect a vice chairman and a secretary. Both of those positions are now open, and then we'll go into the candidate interviews. Then we'll have public participation, and we'll open it up for other business. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda? All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from February 14th?
So moved.
All right. A second.
I second it.
Any changes to the agenda? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Nay. All right. Moving on, there's been, to me, expressed interest from one person in the position of vice chairman, and that is Dr. Ferrara. Is anybody else interested in the position of vice chairman? All right. Is there a motion to elect Dr. Ferrara as our vice chairman?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Is anybody interested in secretary? Nobody has expressed any interest to me. Okay. Shall we maybe leave the position of secretary? Mostly, Molly does that. Really, she does all of the work. So is there a motion to maybe leave that position open for now and come back to this at a later meeting?
So
Yeah.
moved.
Okay. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Excellent. That was quick. Let's move on to candidate interviews. Do we have our folks here?
She's here.
She is. Okay. Excellent.
Madam Chair, can you explain the process we're going to go through?
I am. Yeah. I'm going to wait until the first candidate comes in, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. I am going to, since you're our first person, explain the whole interview process, and then we'll be quiet and let you get into it.
Okay.
So candidates will have up to 3 minutes for an opening statement, and then each commissioner will have up to 3 minutes to question each candidate. The time restrictions will be strictly enforced to allow candidates equal time and keep the proceedings on track. For the candidates, a yellow light will appear when there are 30 seconds left in each time period. A red light will appear, and a tone will sound when that time period has expired. When the tone sounds, commissioners and candidates will be expected to halt their questions or answer immediately so we can move forward. We ask that candidates do not take additional time to summarize. In order to hear as much from candidates as possible, I would ask the commissioners to keep your questions direct and candidates to try to be succinct. To allow candidates an opportunity to elaborate or to communicate something for which they may not have had time during their interview, the Commission will accept hand-delivered, mailed, or emailed statements to the same place as applications were sent by 4 p.m. on Friday, November 9th. Those statements will be compiled and delivered to the Commission at that time. Statements will also be posted on the SBAC website on Monday, November 12th. So whenever you're ready, you can begin.
So, of course, I'm sure you all saw that my name is Regina Miles. I have 2 children in the school system, one at Annapolis High and one at Monarch Academy. I also have a full-time job as I work on Capitol Hill at the Department of Education. I've been there for coming up on 14 years. And I'm looking to try to make changes in the community in which I live, which I've been living here for about 15 years. So I'm looking forward to trying to make some good changes that I think can be made here in Anne Arundel.
Good afternoon, Regina. Thank you for coming today. My name is Natalie, and I represent Casa de Maryland on this commission. Casa is a nonprofit organization that fights, or that protects and looks to help the immigrant community in Maryland and in this region. My question here for you today is, what would you say the most critical issue is in our county and our school system for immigrant families, and what would be one of the solutions that you would propose for that issue?
So what I think I've observed is resources. I've seen many instances where there may be immigrant parents who can't speak English very well, which is hard to communicate, but they also have a platform that allows them to translate. However, I think there could be more programs, because I have noticed that from, again, what I've observed is that they don't have all the resources for everything they need, such as computers at home, money to afford lunch for children. And I think resources is one way to improve that situation.
And if I have a few minutes, just as a follow-up question, working on what you said, that there seems to be a lot of parents who don't have the ability to communicate in English. Do you think that we have a need for more language facilitators in our county?
Yes.
And how do you think that we can bring more language facilitators to our schools?
I think that it can be done through a volunteer circumstance. I know many parents who are bilingual and they do not mind helping in schools. It's just getting that information out there that's needed on a larger platform, not just inside the school, but either online or outsourcing the service.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good evening, Regina. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired. I work at 6:30 in the morning.
My name is Vanessa, and I'm with Anne Arundel County Council PTAs. So my question for you is, what do you believe are the most important characteristics of an effective school board member?
I think the characteristics, one thing that's needed is good listening skills, good communication, and the ability to minimize maybe a barrier between the school community and the parents, being able to work with both. Those are my major characteristics, because I deal with complainants across the United States. So I see a lot that happens, and there are barriers between boards and parents and schools.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Chris Barber. I represent the Central Maryland Chamber of Commerce. I saw in your application you mentioned you were looking to improve ways for institutions to raise money in order to provide better classroom instruction. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so of course I have 2 children. One thing that I've struggled with as a parent are resources, books coming home. Even though I may look young, I remember bringing books home and working from the books. And if you're using a new process such as Common Core, it's very hard for parents at home. Fortunately, I have a computer that I can work from, but all parents don't have that type of access. And then we know that a lot of parents are working more than one job, so they don't have a lot of time to take their children to the library. So my theory in education is hands-on. I have to be able to feel and touch a book to understand. I know that my daughter, the reason why I feel like this is my daughter had some work, and I expressed at the school, are you teaching them how to take proper notes? Because if you're not going to have the resources such as books available for them to bring home, they have to know how to take effective notes in order to study for an exam. That was my problem. I don't know how to raise the money because I don't know the process at that level, but I do know it's much needed, because I've noticed that the students did not take proper notes to study from. And in order for them to achieve their goal, they have to have something to study from.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Miles, and thank you for the friendly greeting when I walked in the door.
Oh, no problem.
What seems like just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
I'm Bill Jones. I'm here as the appointee from the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County. And I had I don't know if it was the opportunity, but a task today to respond to a fact check that was printed in this morning's Capital that turned out not to be all that factual. And what I found when I was doing my research is that there is significantly more inequity in our teacher salary scales in Anne Arundel County than even I thought, and I'm involved in the bargaining. I took a subpopulation of our bargain unit, which is about 6,400 teachers. And I just looked at somebody who's in the mid-range, somebody who's not a new teacher but not ready to retire either. So I used the same step that the State Board of Education uses, or the State Department of Education uses, and I looked at who's being paid at step number 8. Now, ordinarily, and in virtually every other place across Maryland, teachers get paid on pay scales in columns. And the column indicates your education credentials: bachelor's degree, master's plus 36, master's degree in advanced professional certificate, master's plus 30, master's plus 60, and doctorate. And then the rest of it is done by years of experience credit. So in most other places in Maryland, despite the recession from 2009 to 2012, where some teachers got their pay frozen, no step increase, happened all across the state. They got theirs back. So if you took somebody who was at step 8 with a master's degree, they were being paid at step 9, because nobody starts at 0. If you come with no experience, you're on step 1. So, and what I found out in Anne Arundel County that is nowhere near the case. There is the relationship between experience credit and salary step has become virtually dismantled. I know I'm taking up your time asking a very long question, but it's going to get very short. What I found out, that out of the 288 people that are being paid here on step 8, 74% of them have years of experience between 11 years and 15 years. So when we try and compare salary scales, our step 15 might be as good as somebody else's step 15, but our step 15 people are being paid 7 years earlier. And the inequity is all over the board. That was just one salary step. So what would you do to try and help bring some equity back to the salary scales?
So without knowing all of the facts or all of the information, I would have to review data. I'm a big person on reviewing data, performance, and their, of course, qualifications. My personal opinion as far as teacher salary, I think teachers do deserve a pretty large salary. I'm not cut out to be a teacher, and I'm aware of that. So I think teachers are underrated as far as their pay. But of course, I do understand that there is some problems with funding. Not only what comes from where I work at the department, that funding is used in different ways that I'm not aware of at this time. But the only way that I would be able to determine that is actually reviewing all of the facts, their performance, their qualifications, and aligning that with whatever policies and procedures that are already in place.
Okay, then one quick follow-up. I may have actually asked the question the wrong way anyway.
Maybe.
As you review that data, and if the inequity is as bad as I'm telling you it is, would you make that one of your priorities to bring everybody back to teacher salary scales?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Shore, and I also represent the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. First of all, thank you for coming out this evening, and thank you for stepping up. It's hard to do, and I highly respect that. My question is about community engagement. How do you feel about the current board's community engagement and outreach? And do you have any new ideas to share or things that you'd like to add to improve community engagement and outreach?
So I'm not too aware of the board's outreach. Whatever I read is either online. There's nothing really given to me at the school level. Of course, I'm a reader, and I have to read up on a lot of states. So, of course, I run into Anne Arundel's as well. I do think just because I don't have enough information, I do know that I don't personally see a lot of outreach, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's based on the platform that I look at. So I'm typically on my children's school's website, not the main website. So whatever outreach is done, it needs to be dispersed through each school. But it's still, again, hard for me to know because I haven't really been involved with the board too much over the years. I think any issue that I've had, I would take directly to the school or the principal, the teacher, whatever the problem is. Or things that I see, I've expressed it with teachers directly and principals directly. So I don't know what outreach the board does other than reading the information online, and that's how I ran across the board opening. But I did get that through an email, and I do think that's a good way of outreach. Not all schools have that type of access to emails. I've seen many states where they don't do outreach at all. So I do appreciate the emails that I do receive from the board because at least they appear to be from the board.
Ms. Miles, thank you very much for your very thoughtful and very extensive application. I only have one question, and it pertains to the comments you make in one of the responses where you indicate, in addition to critical thinking, etiquette skills are important to ensure polite behavior in society or amongst members of a particular group. Would you elaborate on what you intend to mean by that?
So, as I've been not just here at Anne Arundel, but in other school districts across the United States, one of the things that I have a problem with is math, science, English. All of those are standard required courses, which is appreciated. However, in society, in order for you to survive, I think all people need critical thinking skills, because critical thinking skills will allow you to actually participate or work with others at ease, understanding that everyone is not the same or things may be done differently. I do know in Anne Arundel specifically, just at Annapolis High School, where my daughter attends, in Monarch Academy, they're still very young kids, so I can't quite say too much in that case. But I think what's missing from the courses is critical thinking skills, and I think that's a main factor in order to survive in society, along with math, science, and English. I think we all need it. And this is why barriers are happening between peers, because we're not getting more into their critical thinking skills and allowing them to understand and work through problems using those specific skills. And that's mainly my issue at most schools, because the teachers may touch on it, but it's not enough of teaching them, such as teaching them to work with each other or giving them a situation where one person is standing behind each other, one is giving direction, but at the end, whatever that direction was given, it has to be the same as that other person behind them. That is great communication, but it's also critical thinking skills, because it will allow them to work through that without seeing each other.
Thank you.
Thank you for applying for the position. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. I represent the Association of Educational Leaders, the administration here in Anne Arundel County. What do you see as your role as a board member?
So I see in assisting the board with parent maybe relation issues and somehow improving the instruction. Again, I do want to express that I do not agree with Common Core. And I know I work somewhere where they push for Common Core, but I can tell you that I totally disagree with Common Core because I see the damage that it's doing. And one thing that I would like to see is you can use Common Core, but that should not be the only standard because we all know that all brains do not operate the same. And I see more confusion with the children. So if you do it the old way, in which I learned, and get it right, it's marked wrong. But in actuality, it's correct. And I think the problem is it's holding the kids back instead of getting them moving forward. Common Core should work for some. It may work for some, but it won't work for all. And I think I really would like to see an improvement of the instruction and maybe possibly somehow allowing, of course, more courses aiming towards critical thinking.
My second question, how do you become a consensus builder?
I think you have to be a very good listener, as I've learned over the years. You have to understand policies, of course, common sense as well. I think it's needed for everything. But you need all of that in order to, of course, build a consensus between all. We may disagree or agree, but we have to come together to make something happen that betters Anne Arundel County.
Okay. You talked about the role as a board member. What do you think is the time you need to be an effective board member?
I think once you do all your research, I've had to learn a couple of federal laws within a few weeks. So that means taking it home and studying it. So I think you have to review everything. And I don't think that it will take too long. I can't give a specific time frame. It all depends on the individual. But for me, when I'm passionate about something, it doesn't take long at all. You have to read. You have to inform yourself. You have to gather all the information that you need to carry out any job duty.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I had some questions. You wrote that working for the federal government and administering a federal law would allow you to assist the county in understanding federal regulations while ensuring that all school policies and guidelines are met. Have you noticed that the county is not following federal guidelines in some situations?
In Anne Arundel County, I do recall getting a few complaints. Well, I can't go into any detail about those, but I can tell you that we did receive a few complaints from Anne Arundel County. It's not many. Most of the complaints are from many other states. But we have received complaints, and as far as the federal law that I administer, it is about access, and it gives them control over the disclosures of education records. So I can tell you that Anne Arundel, I think most of their complaints were about access and then maybe of misunderstanding the federal law. Typically, that's what happens.
The school didn't understand the federal law, or the parents didn't?
The school.
The school, okay. I also wanted to ask you, do you believe that a school board is necessary to govern a school system?
I think every entity needs an oversight. I do believe that school boards are a great asset to the school community. I do think they are needed because there's not a lot of staff at the school level that can handle every aspect of running or operating a school system. So I do believe a board is much needed in order for a school system to operate successfully.
That's the best policy, that's the best way to govern.
As long as they communicate, yes.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anthony Victoria. I'm the craft president. I represent the students. I wanted to thank you for coming. My first question is, naturally, if you're applying to be a board member, I assume you're invested in the longevity of the county school system. Where would you like to see this county going in maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the line? What are some things that you feel as though goals we can achieve long term?
I think the goals I would like to see achieved is the higher rates at the school level as far as going to college. I'm not aware of every state, but I would like to see more. I think part of my problem is the school seems overcrowded, and I would like to see more schools put in place in order to hit that barrier. Because I can tell you at Annapolis High, it's elbow to elbow. And this most likely causes that friction between students. So I would like to see, that is one thing I would like to see, is more schools put in place in order for the classrooms to have a better size. I feel like 30 students in a classroom, one teacher is not working.
And my second question is, albeit to your students, your current children in the school system, what are some means in which you can go engaging student opinions or getting student voice as to issues regarding our county?
I'm sorry.
In which you can gauge student opinions.
As me personally? So actually the federal law would prohibit me from doing that. But I would like to talk to students, hear what they have to say. Many students are innovative, but they don't have anyone to listen to their thoughts and what they have to better the school. So I do think either going in and speaking to them, if it's a survey, it just can't be related to, such as PPRA, can't have any of those underlying subjects in it. But I think a survey would be great to see what they like, just like at a job. When you work for the federal government, they make you do a survey to better the agency. So I feel like students should have a voice as well because they are the ones spending that extra time in the schools on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, good evening.
Hi.
My name is Samantha Carter and I'm with the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. And just to put it simply, what does special education mean to you, or what comes to mind when you hear the word special education?
So special education to me means many different things. I do know, because I'm aware of IDEA and the 504 plans, I'm aware that some are behavioral issues and some are, I don't want to put it as more serious issues, but more medical related or medically related. I love special ed students because they seem to be so sweet all the time, but I feel like those are needed. They need more attention, more direction, and I think that's what that means when I hear special education. There's something extra that student needs at that time.
Okay, so if you could make any changes in the delivery of special education services, what changes would you make?
So if I could make any changes in special education, I think there would be more communication with the parent and the actual school. I've seen in many cases where special education, it becomes a problem when the parent disagrees with the outcome of a result from the school. And then they're looking for someone to speak to. And I don't understand each state, but I do know that that seems to be the trending problem. There's some kind of miscommunication barrier between that parent and that school, or the state director for special education. And then that's when it gets really messy. So I would like to see better communication and better, I've seen a lot of IDEA and 504 because that's part of the complaints that I receive. And I think that is the number one issue, is the miscommunication of what their rights are under those special education laws. So I think there would need to be more outreach.
Okay, great. And I have one more question for you. So you mentioned in your application wanting to improve students' attitudes with respect to learning and working with their peers. In what ways can we improve collaboration and communication between differently abled peers and their non-disabled peers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last?
Yes, so in what ways can we improve collaboration and communication between differently abled peers and their non-disabled peers?
I think you can have activities to combine the two. I've seen that even the non-disabled kids, they have fun with even the disabled kids. So I feel like if you put them together, then they feel normal in society eyes. They will feel just as normal. I think when you start labeling a student, that's when it causes a problem.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susanna Kipke. I'm the other appointee of the county executive. I'll finish up. I'm the last question to go. My question is sort of related to what Dr. Ferrara asked, and that is being on the school board, just the time it takes to serve out your duties is a pretty big time commitment, and I'm wondering if you're aware of what the time commitment is, and if so, whether you'll be able to commit that time with all your other responsibilities.
So I can tell you, last year I went back to school for business. So I had a full-time job, 2 children. I was in school, taking care of my father. Unfortunately, he passed.
Sorry.
But I did it. I still graduated. So I do know that I have enough in me to do what I'm passionate about. And I do really care about children. I think especially when I can see from the outside in. And one of the main things is whatever I'm passionate about, I actually do. I've always done over and beyond. If I can't help them at my current job, I go out of my way. When I'm not working, I'm working. So that's my thing. My father always told me give it 110% of whatever you do. So I'm quite confident that I can put in the time.
Okay, thank you. And then if we have time, I have a second question, which is you said 2 children, one at Monarch and one in Annapolis. I'm curious to know what different experiences you've had between that charter school and a regular public school.
So the charter school, I would say, is more intimate, if I can put it that way. It's a more intimate experience. You know everyone once you walk through that door. As far as Annapolis, I don't know anyone. I walk through the door, I have no idea where to go, who to speak with. I don't know of any policies that Anne Arundel has. I know I had to go back and forth last year about a number of things, but I think that Annapolis High and Monarch, they're two different places. Of course, there's bigger kids and then there's smaller kids. But I can say Monarch, it's a more intimate experience, and you can get in contact with the vice principal, the principal, easily. Annapolis, not so much. So I can say that is really the difference that I have at the 2 different schools, is that intimate experience versus I feel like I'm distanced at the high school level.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you very, very much for coming.
Thank you. It's nice meeting you all.
You too. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you. All right. Next we have Jessica. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. We'll find out when she comes in. Kinkosa? Does anybody need a break? Okay.
Seat right here.
Yes, thank you. Good evening.
Hi. You said my name right.
I did say it correctly? Excellent, thank you. So I don't know if you were here when I was explaining the procedure earlier, but you'll have 3 minutes to do your opening statement, and then you'll see a yellow light when you have 30 seconds left. You'll see a red light and hear a tone when your time is up. And then each commissioner will have 3 minutes to ask and answer their questions, and we'll go straight down the line from my right to my left. All right, so whenever you're ready.
So I made this decision after long discussions with my husband. I wanted to make sure that I could make the time commitment. I know I'm busy. I'm executive director at Legal Services. I have 3 very young children. And after discussing with him and looking over the schedule, I decided it would be a great opportunity for me to not only learn more about the school board, but also be able to have a direct impact in my children's education. 2 of my children are currently attending Davidsville Elementary. My youngest will be attending in about 3 years, hopefully pretty soon. And I feel like I have a distinct set of experiences in my life that would provide some different perspective on the school board. I did graduate from public schools. I'm incredibly grateful to the opportunities that those provided me. My parents came to the United States in the early 70s, so I have some similar experiences to some of our newer residents in the county. And selfishly, I do think this is a really great opportunity for me to be able to make a direct impact on my children's, hopefully, career or school career in Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
So I'll begin. My name is Natalie Uribe Robledo, and I represent Casa de Maryland on the commission. Casa is one of the biggest nonprofits for the immigrant community and immigrants' rights in this area. I noticed in your application that you do have a lot of experience working with immigration cases, and of course your experience as a first-generation American here. So my question is going to be a little more detailed. What I would like to know is, I'm sure that you are very aware of how the county has been receiving an influx of more Latino community, more immigrant community in the area. Growing up and going through the Anne Arundel County public school system myself, I noticed that while we do have some resources for English as a second language students and some resources for non-English speaking parents, what I would like to know is, do you see any place where the county is missing the mark on specifically helping the families that either have undocumented students or who may have students who may have undocumented parents at home?
So I don't know how often it comes up where parents of limited English proficiency parents come before the school board to present the issues that personally affect them. I think that they may be scared. They may not want to come across. I do have experiences working with Casa de Maryland in my current position, albeit in Prince George's County. I have worked in Anne Arundel County previously. And I think for most of the immigrant population in Anne Arundel County, they're usually scared to come forward to discuss anything that's currently going on with their students. I feel like I have a distinct opportunity to go out in the community and maybe give them some opportunity to tell me what their children are experiencing or how they feel like the school board can better help them, and maybe that I can educate them on what the school board's position actually is and what they're here to do for them.
My follow-up question to that would be, is currently on the school board, I don't feel that we have anyone who's able to efficiently represent those concerns from that population in our county. So would you be willing to take that responsibility of letting the Board of Education know that there is a significant population in Anne Arundel County that has specific needs and fears due to them being English as a second language, or due to the fact that a lot of these families are mixed status families and parents have a very hard time connecting with the schools or have a fear of participating in school activities?
I do think that I would have that responsibility, not only as a Latina myself, but also I feel like I could go into the community. I'm fluent, well, actually I'm native Spanish speaker. I speak to our clients at my legal services organization in Spanish on a daily basis. While we're not a Spanish organization, I do speak to them, and I feel like I can help at least bridge that gap with that community.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. My name is Vanessa Rivera, and I'm with Anne Arundel County Council PTAs. I'm also a graduate of Dade County, so I love reading that in your application. My question for you, reading all your experience with immigrant families and students, and you also being one, is how can the board and you personally address the learning needs of students from other cultures and languages?
I think personally, I grew up in a location where we took Spanish as a foreign language, and I think selfishly, because I want my children to learn a foreign language, and I think of all the things that have helped me the most in my career, speaking a second language has been a really big factor. I think I understand a little bit more of what this population is missing. I mean, my children go to a pretty affluent school. There's not that many foreign languages, but I think this is an opportunity to show not just the Hispanic children, but also all the other cultures, so everybody understands what's in the county, and to be able to understand the needs of not just one culture, but all of them together.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Chris Barr. I represent the Central Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Very impressive application, by the way.
Thank you.
You mentioned one of your goals with STEM programs is to provide additional opportunities to meet and exceed the ever-changing technology and current workforce. As a professional nerd, that kind of spoke to me. I was hoping you could elaborate on that.
So I am by no means a STEM person. I just know that everything constantly is changing, and the opportunities for children should continue to grow and give them the opportunity to learn more. I know there's different robotics courses throughout the county. I know South River has a STEM course, and I know specifically my children's school has an after-school program for STEM. I think that not every school has those programs, and I think giving children that opportunity is really important. I don't know that much about math. It would be helpful if I did, but I do think it's an important segment of what could be a pretty profitable career for the children in the future if they start earlier.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome, Ms. Quincosa. Do I have
Yes.
that right? I'm Bill Jones. I'm the appointee of the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County, sitting on this commission. I looked over your top 3 priorities and read the rest of your application and resume. Nowhere did I see you reference the hiring and retention of highly qualified teachers. Can you explain why not?
I didn't reference that because I only had the opportunity to provide 3 goals. I do think that's an incredibly important part of the Board of Ed to retain, because we can't have the other programs unless we have highly qualified teachers. So without the highly qualified teachers, my 3 goals would be pretty much useless, I think.
I appreciate that. We have a terrible inequity in the salary scales here. It evolved over time with step increases, where teachers would get a step increase for every year of experience, and then restructuring the salary scale. And on some of our salary scales, we have people with 8 years of experience making more than people with 14 years of experience with similar credentials. If you are appointed to the school board, would you make it one of your priorities to try and alleviate that inequity?
First, I would like to research exactly how that occurred and what the process was as to why. prior to working as the executive director, I actually worked in an organization that had step increases, and we had a CBA. So I have experience as an attorney working there, and then also as a supervisor and working with the collective bargaining agreement. So I would like to know more about the background and research it more before I make a decision one way or the other. But I do think if there's inequity, then we need to review and see why that has occurred.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Lisa Shore, and I also represent Anne Arundel County Council PTAs. First of all, I want to thank you for stepping up and coming forward.
Thank you.
And for your time this evening. My question is sort of a three-part question. How do you feel about the current board's community engagement and outreach? And do you have any new ideas to share or things you'd like to add? And then the third part of that is perhaps specifically in reference to new students or immigrant populations.
So the first question is, I think I reviewed the website. I went online and saw the different, and then based on what my children's school does, I do think there's some community engagement. I did review the meeting from last time where one of the Board of Education stated that they had attended one of the events, and so I do think that there is, but there's always room for improvement, and there's always the ability to attend more programs. What was the second question?
Do you have any ideas for new things you'd like to try, specifically in reference to immigrant populations or folks who are new to Anne Arundel County?
I think there's probably ways to bring the families into the schools, maybe not necessarily at the actual school, but go to them so that they understand what the school board does and what the school is here to do for their children. Maybe some community outreach events. I know in Prince George's County they have and I'm sure they do here too, they have a variety of weekend events where people come out, and then different festivals to include different members of the community. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for taking the time to submit and be here tonight. Going over your application, you cite overcrowding as one of the challenges facing the school system. And you make a comment, you say, I believe with creative thinking and budgeting. I wonder if you would share with me what your creative thinking and budgeting might be. Have any ideas at all?
So I reviewed the budgets. I also reviewed the one of the plans that came out in July of 2018 with all the schools and the percentages of crowding or the percentage of capacity for each one of the schools, specifically to the feeder schools in southern in our location. I think coming in and researching it and having a different perspective, I might come up with a different solution. Having different stakeholders from the community provide their comments would also assist. I can't say that I have the answers as to what a creative solution or budgeting would be. I know that on a daily basis, I look at our budget personally for my organization and try to come up with ideas to have the little bit of money that we have extend a lot further. So I think there's always an opportunity to have another person come on and present ideas. I don't have one specifically. I wish I
Because
did.
most of school construction is paid for by the state and not the local governments. So you'll be on a school board that has emphasis on local government activities, and the funding streams for school construction come from the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for applying for this position and your willingness, your generosity of spirit. I represent the Association of Educational Leaders, which is the administration, the principals, etc., of Anne Arundel County. What do you see as your role as a board member?
I think one of my roles as a board member is to ensure that the voices of the students are heard and what their needs are. I think it's a great opportunity to try to learn more about the education system in Anne Arundel County and try to figure out if there's a way to bridge whatever gap there is in our community and make it a stronger school system.
How do you become a consensus builder?
So I think it's bringing everyone that's at the table to a collaborative decision. Not everybody's going to have the same opinion about everything, but as long as you get buy-in on the final goal, I think you can bring a team together.
What do you think is the time you need to be an effective board member?
Do you mean to get up to speed on?
As a board member, what type of time do you think you will need to be effective?
Okay. I think I will need some time to get up to speed on all of the rules. I understand there's some training provided. I've spoken to a board member to get some more perspective on what the position is and how to get to prepare for not just this interview, but in general. I think coming to the meetings, learning more about it. I've reviewed the manual. I can't say that I know it word for word, but I reviewed it. And then just doing what I usually do, which is try to learn as much as possible from other people that have either been on the board or that would give me the time to ask them questions about what I need to learn. I can't say I know everything I need to learn, but whenever I don't know the answer, I'm happy to ask.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Corinne Frank, and I'm the appointee of the county executive. I also was very impressed with your resume, and I appreciate that you came out. I wanted to ask, you had one of your goals was about school safety, and I wanted to ask about that. You said that school safety must be taught to students while ensuring students continue to feel safe in school. What would be some policies that you could teach to students that would promote school safety? Did you have anything in mind when you wrote that?
I just think it's important to make sure you understand your audience. So teaching a kindergartner wouldn't be this about school safety, probably wouldn't be the same as teaching possibly a high schooler about school safety. You want to make sure you're careful and ensure that those children still feel safe every day at school. It's one of the places they go to learn. And if you're also worried about school safety, then you're less likely, they're not going to be focused on what they need to. I know there's a school shooting today, this afternoon in North Carolina. And just it continues to happen. So anything that we can do to ensure that our children are safe on a daily basis, I think, is really important.
I agree. I have kids in the school too, so it's very near and dear to my heart when I see school safety. I also wanted to ask you, why do you think we need a school board?
As somebody that works for a board, I think it's a very important position. I think it's important to have oversight. I think it's important to have other people that have different ideas than just one person that's in charge of the programs. I think it provides an opportunity to have other voices heard, and I think it's an important function, and it continues to preserve other people's rights instead of just one person being in charge of it, the whole entire school system.
Okay.
For the county.
Yeah, and I do want to tack on one more question if I have time. You said you spoke to a school board member earlier?
Yes.
And you read the manual. What else did you do to research for this? Can you
want
elaborate?
me to go through it?
Oh,
Okay.
just tell me what your process was.
So I reviewed the website. I started there, and then I went through the operating and capital budgets kind of to get an idea of what they looked like. I watched pieces of the last meeting. I reviewed the previous interviews.
Okay.
I watched that. I reviewed the board schedule to make sure it fit in my current schedule for work and everything else and all my other activities. And I made sure that the 5 meetings in January I would be available.
So you did a lot of research.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Anthony Liberatore, and I am I represent the students here of Anne Arundel County. I wanted to say, again, like many, I was impressed with your application. As someone who just lived abroad for a couple months to learn Spanish, I really like that you want to teach other languages in our school system. It's something I really value near and dear to my heart. But my question would be, first off, do you feel as though our county does a good job of involving, I guess our school board is probably the better approach, does our school board do a good job of involving students in their processes or community outreach? How do you feel the board currently does?
So I know there's a student on the Board of Education currently. I think there is most of the Board of Education members do attend different school activities. It's part of what they're supposed to be doing. So I do think that they're trying to engage the community. Could there be additional room? I'm sure there could be, and I'm sure the students probably have opinions that they'd want to be heard.
Okay, yep, that was my follow-up question. If you had any suggestions as to how to better gauge student voice in our county and advocacy.
So I have a high school intern at my office, and he's taught me a lot about social media. So maybe paying more attention to different social media accounts. I don't know that that's necessarily the best use of time, but learning more about what the students currently are looking for would be a good opportunity for everybody to understand a little bit more of what they're seeing and what they need, what their needs are.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
My name is Samantha Carter, and I'm with the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. So I was curious what your thoughts were on the programs and services available to students with disabilities and special needs within our county.
So I only know it in a cursory experience. While when I was at Legal Aid, I didn't handle any of the education cases. I did have the opportunity to answer some questions generally about from parents that were unhappy with the IEPs or any of those other things. I helped them review the grievance policies and that sort of thing, or I actually directed them to those policies. So that's my experience with it. I know the different advocacy groups that are out there that will help, like Disability Maryland and that sort of thing. That's been my experience. That's not to say that I wouldn't learn more about it if I were to become a member of the board.
Okay, great. I had one more question for you. One of the goals you mentioned wanting to accomplish if you're appointed to the Board of Education was in relation to STEM programs. Technology can play a significant role in improving the lives of children with disabilities. How would we make STEM programs accessible to these students?
I think it's coming to where the child is and figuring out how to best work with them. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, especially with children with disabilities, but figuring out if there's ways to include them in those programs to their capability.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Susanna Kipke. I'm the other appointee of the county executive. I'm sorry to keep harping on this issue of time commitment, but I'm curious to know, when you talked to the current board member, did they mention all of the other things that go into being a board member outside of the regularly scheduled meetings?
Yes, we discussed it at length because before applying, I wanted to make sure that I could actually commit to this. I don't like doing anything just half. So as you can see on some of the committees that I'm on, I'm either the co-chair or I'm an active member. So I try to ensure that before I sign up for anything, I know what I'm getting myself into. So I do know that it's a substantial time commitment, and prior to applying, I did discuss it with my spouse to make sure that he was on board too, to make sure that I always had daycare, or I always had him available to help me with our children to make sure I can.
I have 2 toddlers, so
Yes.
same boat.
They're still not at the age where I can leave them at home by themselves, so I always make sure that I have a backup plan for any of my commitments to make sure I don't want to sign up for something and not show up.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm the last one, so thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate your time.
All right, next we have Robert Lieb. Do we want to take a break? Does anybody need a break? You want to? All right, we'll take a. Yes, sir. Thank you. See, that one I get wrong. Does he really? Or are you teasing me? Oh my gosh, you guys. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back here at 8:05. Is that good? Yeah. All right. Does he really?
All right, let's reconvene. Good evening. Now, are we still going in order? So we're still going in order? All right. So you are Mr. Excellent. All right. Welcome. You will have, as you know, 3 minutes for your opening statement. You'll see a yellow light. When you have 30 seconds left, you'll see a red light and hear a tone when your time is up. After that, each commissioner will have 3 minutes to ask questions and have them answered. Again, you'll see a yellow light when you have 30 seconds and hear a tone when your time has expired. Do you have any questions before we begin? Okay.
No.
Then you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Robert Leib. I'm a 1972 Naval Academy graduate. I served 22 years on active duty, retired in 1994. I was a surface warfare officer, which meant I was a ship driver, cruisers and destroyers. And some of you have heard some of my stories, and it was a great time, a great 22 years. My last tour of duty, I was on the staff of the Academic Dean and Provost of the United States Naval Academy. I was the chief financial officer for that, for him. It was the largest cost center at the Naval Academy. And as a result of that, I sort of got to know some of the folks in the local education community through events and through interactions. So when I retired, the first position I took was with Anne Arundel Community College. I hadn't any idea I was going to do that, but I was in the facilities side of the house and doing things that naval officers did for a long time, and that's follow the rules. And if the instructions and the regulations say things are supposed to be one way, you make sure they're that way. And so I got to review many of the programs at the college and help them with that. And while doing that, the position at the public school system came available. And I was very fortunate. I interviewed for that, and Dr. Carol S. Parham, then the superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, she hired me as the Director of Business and Government Services. That was my first real interaction with the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. It was pretty interesting, to say the least, because the gentleman I was going to work for was the guy named Ron Beckett. He was the Associate Superintendent. And everyone says, oh, you got this, don't worry about it. Well, Dr. Parham gave me a call and said, yep, the board's voted to bring you in at my recommendation, but it's not the title and it's not the money you said it was going to be. And I said, well, that's fine. I'll still come into the school system. It was the best decision I ever made. I had a tremendous 9 years with Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Director of Business and Government Services. I was responsible for most of the non-instructional side of the house with the exception of facilities. And so it ran the gamut of human resources, technology, budget and finance, you name it, we did it. So when new superintendent came in, I stayed with him, and ended up going with Anne Arundel County government after that. And so I've been involved on the edges of Anne Arundel County Public Schools for a long time. I believe I bring some unique perspective to the board, having been part of it in one way or another. Also, my daughter is a wife of an active duty Marine, and in a year or so, he's going to retire, and they're coming back to Anne Arundel County. Why? For the public schools. They're at Crofton Woods for 3 years. My daughter had her sons in 3 different states, and with Anne Arundel being the 4th. And she was amazed at the amount of resources and the effectiveness of our program. And so as I told Superintendent Arlotto, I've got skin in the game, and I want to try and do everything I can to keep the school system as high as it can be.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leib.
Leib, correct.
Well, thank you for coming today, and thank you for your service as well. My name is Natalie, and I am on the commission representing Casa de Maryland. They are a nonprofit that deals with the immigrant community and immigrants' rights in our area. My question here would be in regards to that population in our county. I'm sure you've noticed over the years that we have gotten more and more diverse as a county. We've received a good amount of Latino community members coming in, as well as other immigrant communities coming in. So my question for you would be, are there any issues, or do you find any areas where we lack in engaging with these communities as students, as well as families and parents of students? And then the second question to that would be, what are any ideas that you have in order to resolve those issues?
Well, I do understand that, English as a second language is a challenge for us, and it's been a growing challenge. As a matter of fact, Tyler Heights Elementary School, it's, from when I started, how was it now, 1994, that's almost 20-some years ago, that school has completely changed its whole dynamic. And we see that's probably the biggest example of the growth of English as a second language, Hispanics in particular in that area. So continued progress in making sure we have, the people, the teachers that are prepared and trained, and in order to, communicate and relate with the families and the communities of our immigrants. I believe that's critical. And of course, that goes with that, you have to have the resources to support them. So I don't think there's a silver bullet out there. I believe that our role in the Board of Education, the role of the Board of Education is to work with all stakeholders in the community and the schools in order to try and collaborate together to maximize resources to apply to our challenges. And so I don't know of a silver bullet for that, but I do recognize it. I understand that those are some of the steps, and I know we've taken them over the years. Every year we seem to increase funding in that area, and we just need to continue to keep our attention on it. And as some would say, our pedal to the metal, or whatever however you want to call it.
And if I have time for just a quick other question, what is your opinion on having school resource officers participate in some type of cultural sensitivity or cultural education before they are able to interact with the students?
I think that's probably a great idea. I think it's a good practice. It's probably a best practice in many ways. School resource officers are a tremendous asset for us, and we're not lucky, but we're fortunate that our county, the county government, the police, the law enforcement, and the school system work so collaborative together to ensure those needs are being met.
Thank you so much.
Yipper.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. My name is Vanessa Rivera, and I'm with the Anne Arundel County Council PTAs.
Okay.
So my question for you is based on your goals. One of your goals you stated was to ensure that graduates of AACPS can compete for employment opportunities. So can you elaborate a little bit on that and
Sure.
how you will ensure?
One of the things I did for the county when I went to county government, that was during BRAC 2005, Base Realignment and Closure, which saw tremendous growth and challenges out in the western part of our county. And I was the chairman of the Fort Meade Growth Management Committee it was 8 counties and one in the Baltimore City, and I was the chair of that committee, trying to help manage that growth and prepare us for it. And as I looked at it, as the county government, what I got the county government to agree to was that the single best thing we could do to prepare our county to be successful with this influx of growth and influx coming to us was to ensure that our students were going to be prepared, qualified, and successful to compete for the jobs of the future that this technology growth in the western part of our county represented. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been out to the National Business Park, which is right across 295 from Fort Meade, but it's Crystal City like Washington, D.C. By now it's probably even bigger. But the jobs that are there are family supporting jobs that aren't going to be outsourced somewhere. And we owe it to our students to ensure that they are the ones that are going to get those jobs. And thereby we keep our best and our brightest here in Anne Arundel County. I get a little excited about this. This is a soapbox I used to get on when I was out in the community, trying to, prepare folks for what was coming. But I really believe that's probably our highest task. And our first priority should be to ensure our students are going to be successful.
And if I have time, I have, in lines with that question, what is your vision for education in this community?
I believe Anne Arundel County Public Schools is an excellent school system. And I believe the reason it is because the community has worked together to support it. You saw the SAT scores just came out. That was on the front page of the Capitol. And I remember when I was with the school system, I used to try and get us, and I still think in many ways, to believe, rather than just keep asking for more, which is things that's natural, I want to be able to show what we've done with what we got. Because in Anne Arundel County, we deliver a high-quality product, a high-quality result for the resources that are put at the school system's disposal. And so I believe to continue that success and to increase it is to show what you can do with just that step up. What's the next step? What can we do if you get this for that? And how does that translate to success for our community? So I guess that vision is to try and get us to realize that, money isn't the answer to everything, but money with a plan, and with a plan that's going to give you a result, is the way you can go forward and ensure you continue to maximize resources throughout the future.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And thank you for your service. The question I was going to ask you was just asked, so I'm going to...
Okay, we'll go to Bill.
I'm going to fly off the cuff a little bit. I saw on here that you had some history with Leadership Anne Arundel.
Yes.
Does that make you a previous graduate? Or?
Yes, I'm a graduate of the 2003 executive program.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
I was 2016 flagship.
Congratulations.
The best class
it's
ever,
a great thing. You were in with Rod Cofield.
Yep.
Cool.
So could you speak a little bit more about your history with the county school board and how that would help you if you got on the board?
Well, number one, I've sat in this seat many times doing other things and trying to work with my Board of Education from a staff perspective. So number one, I understand that. Number two, I was in the community with PTAs, with parent organizations, with principals, with teachers, trying to understand what their concerns are and how we can best translate them into policy that the board could implement, that then would be converted to administrative regulation and into practice to thereby improve what's going on in the classroom, what's going on in the administrative offices, et cetera. So I think I have an understanding of that. I have an understanding that the Board of Education is in my time, it was 5 votes. I guess it's 9 now, so I guess it's still 5 votes. But it's not one person, it's the board. And the board individuals do not speak for the board. The board speaks for the board. So I have a real world understanding of how what's really how that operates at the deck plates. And I believe that makes me practical application of those things should bring good results.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Lab, welcome to a place that must still seem a little bit familiar to you.
It is. We used to sit right over there, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I have a question, but I want to preface it. Collective bargaining, when originally, I don't discover it isn't completely the wrong word, but I don't know what to use. Right. Was initially intended for two parties, an employer and an employee organization. All across Maryland in public school negotiations, there's a third party involved. And that third party doesn't sit at the bargaining table. The employer and the employee organization sit, they negotiate in good faith, get an agreement, then it's subject to being budgeted by the county executive and the county council, the third party that's not at the bargaining table. Having said all that, do you think there is a proper place in Maryland Public Schools for collective bargaining?
Yes, I do. I've been on both sides of that fence, as you know.
That's why I asked you
When I was
this
at the
question.
school system, I mean, I was down there, advocating as strong as I could for Anne Arundel County Public Schools and funding for it. The county executive first, and then if that didn't work, with the county council.
Right.
And back then, we counted victories as very small steps, much different than what it's been in more recent history in the last 10 years or 5 years, let's say. But I've always been amazed that oftentimes, and I don't know what the practice is today, of how prior to entering into those negotiations, that the school system and the board did not have a little more formal consult with the county to get not a realistic look at what the county believes their resources are going to be, and therefore help find a boundary of where they think they can be successful at always getting them, and never having something not go unfunded because they know there's good odds of it. Now turn that over to the county side, and I believe the county doesn't fully appreciate, it still doesn't, that relationship between the collective bargaining relationship that the Board of Education is in. And sometimes you get into this, well, they did this and we did that, and so we're not going to do, and it gets to be a finger-pointing drill. So I believe with this, we have the first step to elected boards of education, which I support. I think that's a great first step. But I also think there are other steps that have to come. And with that, I believe in the long term, as we find out that elected boards can be successful, elected boards can be responsible, another step to come with that is elected boards need to be responsible for raising the funds to meet the requirements for the school system. And that's taxing authority. And that'll go against a lot of what a lot of people think. But I believe that's a progression that we need to see coming. And I don't know how long it'll take, but I believe it's something that progression needs to be there.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
My name is Lisa Shore, and I also represent Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. And I also want to give another shout out to Leadership Anne Arundel Class of 2003, flagship.
Outstanding, yeah.
My question is, from your extensive experience in our county, all different levels of government, all different perspectives, do you have any outreach or community engagement ideas for either Anne Arundel County Public Schools or for board members specifically?
Just like my first question, I don't see any silver bullets in that. That's just, talking like my son-in-law's a Marine, grunt work. We need to get out there. We need to be there. We need to be into the PTAs. We need to be in the schools. We need to walk the halls. We need to see what's happening. That's the most effective outreach. That's how you find out what is really going on. I remember when I was with the county government and on the facilities master plan, strategic MGT study, Edgewater Elementary School. The folks at Edgewater, they understood what that was all about. But by going there and walking with the PTA president and the moms and dads who were there, you get to realize how dedicated they were to that school and how concerned they were about the problems they were facing. They understood that the school system was doing all they could to mediate whatever mold growth that would come, it'd come in and take care of it. But you got to understand how, just to the root of their being, how that was affecting them. And that you only do by going there and being with them. And I believe that's the biggest thing. I can recall back in my days with the board, we saw board members, but not that much. Not that much. So I think that is the most important thing. I know Bob Mosier, he's not here, but these guys have done a lot more on the web than we ever dreamed was possible, and the media outreach, etc. But media outreach doesn't compare to eye, body to body, heart to heart. It just doesn't. Mr. Klassmeyer, always great. Always great.
A pleasure.
Yes, sir.
You are eminently qualified for the position you seek, as in my opinion. However, are you retired now?
Yes, I am.
So you would be able to devote your full energies to this position?
Yes, I would. Yeah,
okay.
I'm fully retired, finally.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't believe that because my things I volunteer for, the Historic London Town and Gardens, Maryland Hall,
yeah, I see all
Veterans Affairs Commission, but no, as far as, I mean.
And you're
yes.
sure you want to do this?
I know, that's the same thing Fred Schramm said to me when I said I was going to leave the college and come over to the school system.
Yeah, right.
He says, you're going into the frying pan, buddy. Don't you know that? That's the fire.
Yeah. We've touched a lot of the common bases through our careers.
Yes,
Thank
sir,
you
we
very
have.
much.
Thank you, sir.
I represent AEL, the Association of Educational Leaders, and I know you know me from various functions. What do you see as your role as a board member?
Board members, number one, someone asked me about vision. One of the board, there's no one primary above another. There's a lot of very high priorities of board members, I think, in my mind. Number one, those who work collaboratively as a team with my fellow board members, the senior staff of the school system, and the leadership in our schools and the PTAs to establish a vision for the school system. What are we going to be? What do we want to be? So I believe that's one of the main goals. The other one is someone says to work collaboratively throughout the school system. Another one is to be a good listeners. You got to be able to listen to the folks. You got to be able to understand. You may not agree, but you have to be able to understand respectively. The other thing I believe is to support our superintendent. I mean, the board is there to set policy, educational policy. The board is not there to make day-to-day decisions. It's not there to make one decision a week or one decision a month in the execution of what goes on in the school system. That's the superintendent's job. The board hires the superintendent. The superintendent hires his staff, her staff. And it's their responsibility for what that staff does. So I believe the board has to be very careful not to confuse those boundaries and go walking around in areas they shouldn't be in.
How do you become a consensus builder?
You have an attitude that there isn't a bad idea. You have a conviction that you don't have the only ideas that could work. You have the wherewithal to be able to take criticism and not let it get under your skin and understand, okay, what piece of this might apply or what all of it might apply. So I believe it's just to have that sort of conceptual approach to things that, A, you don't feel threatened and you don't threaten somebody else by how you try and deliver your opinion or your advice or your suggestion.
What do you think is the time you need to be an effective board member?
Whatever time it takes. That sounds strange to say that. I thought of this driving in, that, my wife first, well, how many meetings will there be? I said, well, there's 2 a month for sure, and then there's the workshop for this and the workshop for that. And then on the way in, I realized, well, I get to be in this position again. I'm going to get a lot of homework. on a weekly basis. I can remember the couriers delivering stuff to the board members. And I used to be quite frustrated when I sat here making a presentation. It was obviously that board member A didn't have any idea what I was talking about because they didn't take the time to read the material that was given to them to prepare. And so that's something that I understand I'm going to have to do, because I've been on that other side where I say, wait a minute, I've worked my butt off getting here to present this to you, and you didn't have the courtesy to look at the information. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Lieb.
Hi, Live, I'm sorry.
Oh, Live, I'm sorry.
Don't worry, I've been doing it all my life.
Everybody gets my name wrong, too. I'm Corinne Frank. I'm the appointee of the county executive.
Outstanding.
And I actually was going to ask you about your second goal as well originally, so I'm going to maybe not have as many questions tonight for you.
Okay.
You discussed that you wanted to maintain the initiative and momentum to reduce student body size in our high schools. Could you, I know you only get 15 words, could you expand on, which initiatives you agree with and you would like to further?
What? About the high school one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really support that initiative of the county executive. I believe smaller schools, smaller student bodies, A, give more attention to the student, B, give the student more opportunities, C, give the teachers more personal interaction with the students, and that just goes all the way down that totem pole in that building. I also look at it that, if you look at 2,000 kids in a school, it's so impersonal. It's something like being on ships. I was a cruiser destroyer guy. Why? Well, I like being on a ship where I knew, hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing today? Because I know Bill Jones. I know what he did. I know things about him because it's a small enough community. And I believe that's important in schools as well. I also think it gives our students many more opportunities to find themselves in a position to be successful. Not only in the classroom where they get a little more personal attention perhaps, but also in the extracurricular activities, which, as you see from I've given you, I really believe in involvement in things. I believe in being part of the community. And when I was in school, and all school, I believe in having activities that broaden your interests and broaden your perspective. And I believe a smaller student body gives you that opportunity. There's only one athletic team in football and soccer. There's only one band. And so the smaller that aggregate is you're coming from, the more opportunity individuals will have to be able to participate in that and glean the rewards from that, which will help you later in life. Teamwork, working with others, being part of something bigger than you. All those things come to better fruition from a smaller body, I believe.
Okay. Also, do you agree that the school board is needed? And do you agree that with the power structure that we have now with a superintendent and a board, do you agree with the way that is set up?
Absolutely. I believe the Board of Education throughout our country plays a vital role in our communities. I mean, I just can't imagine not having that. Okay. I mean, you look, I've been in front of the county council as often as I've been in front of the Board of Education. And you try and get the county council to understand all the nuances of what the board is facing on a day-to-day basis on top of what they're doing in council chambers, that's not going to work real well. So I believe that vital position of the board, and it has to do with the answer I gave to Dr. Ferreira. The board, you got to be out there in the community. You can only go so many places if you're a county council member and you don't have a board of ed. I believe it's vitally important.
Thank you very much, and I also want to thank you for your service to our country, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anthony Liberatore, and I am the president of the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils, or otherwise known as CRASC here. What did you say, sir?
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, I want to thank you for your service, and thank you for applying and investing in the education here in Anne Arundel County. My question is, are you familiar with my organization or Teen Advisory or the role of the student member of the board and how they relate to our county?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, board member Terry Gillingham was the student member of the board when I was hired.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that. Plus, CRASC, yes, I'm fully aware of CRASC.
So you feel as though, do you have any suggestions as to how we can maybe improve student advocacy or involvement here at the county level or anything of that sort?
no specific suggestions. I would comment that, you go around, as I went around when I was working here at the school system, we have a very unique situation with our student board member, and I believe that sort of is reinforced by the successful, crash success, and I believe that puts us in a whole different place than some of the other school systems. So no, I have no specific suggestion other than, stay involved, stay up to date in school.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Samantha Carter, and I'm with the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. So as you've heard often, AACPS is working to elevate all students and eliminate all gaps. How would you envision us narrowing the achievement gap for struggling students, specifically for those with disabilities?
Interesting question. I don't have an education degree, just so you know. But I guess I'm going to use an example on that. Fort George G. Meade is a compassionate assignment post. And as a result, families, facing challenging situations which could involve special education, they get assigned to Fort Meade, in order, because we, in our region, we're pretty well known for having services that can meet those needs. But resources, again, resources. That seems to be the underlying panacea, not panacea, but underlying object that you need to obtain. The federal government goes through something every year called for federal impact aid. You submit forms on children that are in your school system, and based on that is how much federal impact aid you get. I can't remember what the form is called, but we seem to have a challenge getting our families out there in western part of the county to realize that that's an important form to fill in, because how many kids you have in the system that are being federally impacted children that are being educated here, has a direct correlation with how much federal impact aid you get from the federal government. As a matter of fact, when that first started, it was dollar for dollar. I mean, they were giving us all the impact aid was to take care of federal children and military children who are in your school system. Well, it's no longer that way. There's some very complicated, crazy formula that you hardly get anything. But those funds are tied to the special education requirements as well. So I guess it's a realization that, as it is the case with English speaking second language, ESOL, these are two very focused groups that require a laser-like focus of energy in order to be successful in executing our responsibilities to ensure they get a full and complete education on both sides of that. So I believe, again, it comes down to resources and keeping our eyes on that goal.
Okay, great. And thank you. To just piggyback on our discussion, I'm actually a resident of Fort Meade.
All right.
And I'm familiar with other families. So as you know, a lot of children of service members are having to relocate due to their parents' duty to serve. How can we make the transferring of services smoother for families experiencing relocation, especially students with an abundance of documents pertaining to their education?
Well, I believe Maryland is, a few years ago, we signed the interstate compact that is supposed to make that a much more easier process for our military children. I'm not aware, though, of how that's really panned out. But I'll find out soon, because next summer my daughter's coming back with my oldest grandson's going to be going into 8th grade, and my youngest will be going into 6th grade. And they're not coming to Fort Meade, but they're going to be in the Crofton area. But still, that same challenge applies at the Crofton, feeder system the same way it does at Meade. So if you're still here and I'm still here, I'll let you know, because my daughter is not shy. She'll let me know.
Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Susanna Kipke. I'm the other appointee of the county executive. I'm curious to know, my dad was also a Navy guy for a short time, and then he switched to the Marine Corps. But his military service influenced, the way that he lives his life, and it still does. And I'm curious to know how you would bring your military experience to bear on this position on the board.
That's a really good question. Well, I know, number one, I know what the chain of command is. Number two, when a task is assigned, I know how to go about executing it. But number three, what the military, sometimes you don't get this credit. You know how important the soldiers and sailors are. I mean, the officers and the chiefs, they do a great job. And chiefs are like the senior enlisted. But the real blood and guts, the soul of the military is the soldiers and sailors. And here in the public school system, the correlation would be, the administrative office, they do a good job. I mean, they do really well. But the real blood in the system are the teachers and the principals and the people in our classrooms, in our schoolhouses. And I believe in the military, you get to understand that and how important it is to keep that lines of communication open, the lines of collaboration open, and the lines of understanding going back and forth. Never blocked. Because that, the custodian in Crofton Woods Elementary School could do something that day that would make an unbelievable difference in that child's life. And you just don't know when that's going to happen. And so by having the best people understanding what the school system's mission is and how their position in that contributes to the whole, that makes the goal attainable.
That was the last question, so thank you very, very much for coming out and for your time, and thank you for accommodating our shifting schedule.
That worked out. I had just gotten in the car when Bob called, and I don't usually answer the phone. I mean, I don't know that number, but for some reason I did tonight.
Well,
so
it's
that
a lucky
worked out
thing.
well.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Kathleen McQuaid. Are we shuffling? Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Who? Molly's on it. We can do it out of order. Yeah. Well, hold on. We're about to find out. Okay. Yes.
I'm okay with the flip.
Excellent. Thank you.
I was also just getting in the car when Bob called.
Wonderful.
And I also don't answer the phone usually. I don't know what made my finger do that.
Obviously, this is not Ms. McQuaid.
So
we're going out of order.
We'll go out of order.
Yeah,
That's.
so this is Mr. Leone.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to not be doing this at 10:20.
Well, I'm so glad. We are all glad of that too. I think, were you sitting there already when I went over the interview procedure? I'll go over it. I'll go over it again.
Thanks.
So you'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement. When you have 30 seconds left, you'll see a yellow light. When your time is up, you'll hear a tone and you'll see a red light. And we ask you to please conclude immediately. And then each commissioner will have 3 minutes to ask questions and have those questions answered. And again, we try to be concise and wrap it up when you hear the tone. If there's anything that you feel has been left unsaid or you were cut off at the end of this, you'll have additional time to send in those comments to us, to the same place where you sent your application. And we will get all of that in writing. So anything you feel like you need to add afterward.
Sounds good.
All right, whenever you're ready, you can start.
All right, so my name is Ray Leone. I live in the District 30, but in the larger district of District 7. I'm in that little piece of Edgewater that is that kind of gerrymandered piece of District 7. I've grown up here with the extent of moving away long enough to serve in the military and live on my own on the western side of the county. I moved back in 1993 to raise my kids here because I had graduated from South River and I knew what a great school it was. Graduated in the first graduating class there, the first full graduating class in 1981. So now you know about how old I am. I have been involved ever since my kids started school. I started off with a career in cable television coming out of the military that kind of dovetailed with my military training. And from there, moved back into Edgewater for the school reasons, and knew I wanted to become involved in their education because that was how my mom had been with us when I was raised. So I'd had a really good example of how that worked, and ended up working myself through Edgewater Elementary School. Unlikely enough, having listened to Bob talk, I was part of that MGT study. I was part of that walk that Bob did through there, and part of that commitment to Edgewater that he talked about. We worked our way from that into Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs, where I was the president there, then Maryland PTA as the president there. And the entire time being active in the school systems structure at the board level, participating on the Superintendent's Advisory Council at both here in Anne Arundel County and at the state level with Dr. Grasmick. I was involved in the Common Core rollout and the ability for us to have some meetings around the state talking to parents about how Common Core rolled out and giving a good explanation of what they were seeing back in the days when Dr. Dallas Dance, did the "we're building the plane while we're flying it" kind of things. I've been around it for a considerable amount of time. The last 14 or 15 years, I've worked with the budget. I've advocated on a lot of different levels, and I've sincerely enjoyed being a part of the process at multiple levels. And I think it's a natural fit to move forward for me.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leone. My name is Natalie. Thank you for coming and for your service. My name is Natalie, and I represent Casa de Maryland on this commission. And they are the biggest community immigrants' rights organization in the area. So naturally, my questions will be regarding those community members. I noticed in your application that one of the things that you wanted to accomplish if appointed was to increase public participation. I think you were referring to increasing public participation within the board and the community, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So kind of piggybanking on that issue is how would you increase public participation with immigrant families and the schools directly? There seems to be a big disconnect between the parents feeling comfortable enough to be active in the schools and in their students' education.
All right. So as a PTA leader, I tackled this a couple of different times in a couple of different ways. And while there's no real good way to match every instance, I think a good starting base is finding ways for the administration in the schools to be able to reach comfortably out into the Hispanic community in this case. I'll give Edgewater as an example. It's been exploding over the last few years. It's virtually flipped its ratio in just the 10 years that my children have been out and into college now. And we don't always do a great job of making sure that what's going in the backpack or what's coming home is actually getting digested at the other end. A lot of times it's a student that's relaying that information at whatever level they want to relay it at in some cases. Not that there's any dishonesty or anything there, but I mean, if you're bringing home a D on your report card and mom and dad doesn't know what the D actually looks like, it's not necessarily going to be the greatest of conversations. But that being said, you can also find ways to get a few more bilingual facilitators and ESOL-oriented folks into those classroom and administrative situations so that you make sure that it is getting to the parents. And we can do the same thing at a level here at the board, making sure that we have facilitators available when Spanish-speaking folks come in here to voice concerns and allow them to be able to do that more fluidly without having that stopgap in it.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing up the aspect of students having to translate documents for their parents, because when I was a student in the Anne Arundel County Public School System, that was my responsibility.
Yeah, I saw it
for
a
my
lot.
parents. And also piggybacking on that, another responsibility that I had as a student when there wasn't much language facilitators or any kind of a cultural program in place to help these families, as my parents specifically were not in a legal status at the time. So my question is, how can we relay, can I finish that question? How can we relay to parents that participating in school and coming to school is a safe environment?
Well, my core belief is that a student is a student. It doesn't matter whether or not, I mean, they're still a child, and a child needs an education in order to further themselves no matter what happens. Illegal, legal, you can't bring that into the school itself. You can't punish a child for the woes of their parents. You can't bring that into the conversation. It's not fair to the child. You have to give them all the same supports that every child gets. And you have to do as adequate a job as you can find to do that in order to make that work.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out, Ray.
Thank you.
And you already know me, but I'll say again, Vanessa with Anne Arundel County Council PTAs. My question was like hers for increasing public participation. So more in terms of with all your experience with PTA, what kind of relationships should the board have with its families, communities, and parents, and specifically what role will you play?
Well, the board has a kind of a unique position when it comes to that interplay, and that's going to change considerably over the next 6 years. So as political voting takes place and it becomes an elected school board, there's going to be more constituent service kind of thinking in the back pocket of a lot of those folks. We have to do a good job of making sure that the community isn't lost in that process. So I know a lot of times when board members, new prospective board members come in, the first thing they're said is you take off the hat of where you live and you put on the hat of the entire school system. That might not be as easy a thing to do in an elected system as it sounds, in real play. But you have to make the effort of going into those communities and finding out what the needs are. And it's not just showing up for the events, but it's holding town halls every once in a while, moving the board into the community every once in a while, maybe a one-time excursion a year down into South County, one into West County, one up into North County, and then the bulk of their meetings here. And looking at more nighttime meetings, because it's very hard for the public to participate in a daytime meeting. I know that's fiscally challenging because you've got to bring all those folks here, but in the same turn, the more community input you can get, the better off your decisions are going to be.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir, and thank you for your service. My name is Chris Barber. I represent the Central Maryland Chamber of Commerce, and you folks hit on exactly what I was gunning for. So, can you speak a little bit more about your goal resolving compensation issues?
Well, it's a challenge. So, and Bill has brought it up a couple of times because I was watching at home before I got the call from Bob. The reality is there is a third party involved. So the school system has to do a really good job of anticipating what its needs are going to be. The bargaining units have to do a really good job of coming to the table with what their expectations are going to be and what their needs are going to be. And then those two units, unfortunately, have to hash that out over whatever that is, and then walk that to the county system. And when the county system works its way through that, you got to go all the way back through the process backwards, take what the county system brings back to the table, and make a good agreement out of that. So I understand the process. I don't necessarily agree that it works really well, because it leaves that third party out there to kind of come in from the side. If everybody's on the same page, I think you're good. But compensation-wise in this county, we have missed a lot of steps. We have gotten to the point where pay is, if it's not physically unequal, it's definitely perceived unequal. And it's not going to be easy to attract teachers into a system that already perceives that their pay is lower than everybody around them. We have to do a better job of communicating exactly what it is we need to make that go away. And then we have to figure out a way to prescribe it in such a manner that we don't have to double the budget to do it. We're still only 51% of the budget, and we have to find ways to work within that structure. I don't see a golden nest egg at the end of anybody's rainbow that's going to finance everything that we need. So we have to bargain our way to that point.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Welcome, Mr. Leone. A familiar chair, a familiar room. You've been through.
Been on that side twice, been on this side. This will be my third.
I know. I've spoken to you enough and asked you enough questions, and I'm having a hard time thinking of what to ask you that you haven't already answered over the course of the years. You have been the gold standard in school volunteerism. I do want to touch on one topic that was just mentioned. That has to do with compensation. Compensation is physically uneven and inequitable. We have people of 5, 6 years difference in their experience credit earning the same money and earning less than some of their colleagues with less experience credit and a lesser credential even. It evolved over time, and we have to find a way to fix it. And it's not only salary, it's workload. Every year class sizes go up because every year we don't get the positions that are requested. So we're working for more kids, working longer hours, and our pay's not keeping up. We have become the lowest paid urban district in the state of Maryland, and the real estate website niche now has lowered us to the 16th out of 24 districts in Maryland as a favorable place to come and teach. That's got to be addressed. So I guess my question to you would be, would you make that one of your priorities to make this a more attractive district to come and teach?
I'll put it in a practical term. So my daughter graduated from Hofstra last year, last May. She went to New York City. New York City was able to lure her there with a 6-month internship and the promise of paying for her master's degree, or letting her pay for an $11,000 master's degree that'll be taken out of her check in small chunks. Her starting salary was $54,000 with a top-of-the-line health insurance and a top-of-the-line retirement package that she qualifies for almost immediately. Getting my girl to come home to live in Anne Arundel County around me wasn't there, wasn't going to happen.
Right.
I don't see it happening in the near future, but I think we owe it to not only our teachers, but teachers that are going into the profession now, going into Towson, going into the University of Maryland, going to Frostburg to get teaching degrees, to fix it so that they are looking forward to coming to work here, where we know what the quality of living already is, where it's great to live here, and not having to consider working someplace else to get to the step level that they need to come back to where they want to live, to come here.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for everything you do for our community. My question is related to sort of, I guess, autonomy. It's a double question. Boards of education members have personal opinions, yet they set policy as a team. Any ideas on how you might balance that dynamic and any anticipated challenges?
Well, there's always challenges when you try to put 9 or 11 people in a room and come out with consensus. But you have to go into that as a consensus builder. So if you have a really good idea that you think, is bubbled up inside you and you want to portray it to the board as something that you want to make a positive change toward in a policy or in a structure or in how we do business, you have to be able to win the rest of your board, or at least the 5 votes you need to make that move. And you can't do that without listening first to what their feelings are on it, without being thick-skinned enough to take criticism and mold your idea maybe a little to the left or a little to the right to make it kind of fit the group cohesiveness. But you can't be a bull in a china shop on a public board. You just can't. You have to be able to work well with other people. You have to be able to listen to ideas, and you have to be able to bring your ideas to the table. But, you know, as I've taught in PTA umpteen million times, is everybody at the table has to be listened to. Nobody has a bad idea. They may not agree with you, but you have to hear it all the way through and actually do the hard work of talking it through and making the adjustments where it's needed to, and live with it when it doesn't.
Mr. Leone, I have no questions.
Okay. You took her by surprise.
Reflecting.
You were dozing.
No, I was reflecting.
She's trying to think.
Yes.
It's after 9 o'clock. Dozing
okay.
would have been acceptable
No,
too. No,
we
I'm
don't
kidding.
do that. I'm reflecting, thinking. I represent the Association of Educational Leaders, and that's the administration and the principals, et cetera. What do you see as your role as a board member?
Well, the prescribed role is that we hire and fire the superintendent, we set policy, and we do the overarching work of making sure that the policy we set, the regulations that we pass, and the superintendent that we hire are actually doing that. So whether that's done through strategic goal planning or whether it's done through just a watch of the day-to-day operations of how we do things, or being fiscally minded when the budgets are sitting in front of us, or whether redistricting options, you know, need a little more tweaking or a little more finessing, you know, that's our role. Our role isn't to walk into a school and dictate how we want things to be. Our role isn't to do the actual administrative work of the school system. That's what we hire and fire a superintendent and his staff for.
What do you think is the time you need to be an effective board member?
Probably more than any of us actually have, but I would say the minimum starts at probably 20, 25 hours a week and probably goes as high as 50 to 60 hours a week.
Okay. What do you do to build a climate of consensus on the board?
Well, I think you have to listen first. In everything, you have to listen first. You have to know what the temperature of the room is before you walk into that kind of thinking. And then you have to be able to speak to what your thoughts are on them, and then to be able to collaboratively look at what the thoughts of everybody else on that board are. I don't think there's any one way of being collaborative. Each thing that you address, whether it be policy or whether it be regulation, are going to be things that you have a different feeling than the neighbor sitting on either side of you is going to have. And you have to build that consensus on a one-on-one basis. And that's through listening to the school system's take on it, listening to the public's participation on it, which is rare some days. I mean, I've seen policies go through without any public participation on it. But listening first, I'd have to fall on that as my sword.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your service, and thank you so much for all of your involvement in our schools. I love the PTA. I'm a big fan. My name is Corinne Frank, and I'm the county executive, one of the county executive's appointees. One of my questions was already asked, so I kind of wanted to just hit on some things that you had discussed. You mentioned the elected board. Do you agree that an elected board is more effective?
Well, I can say up until 2 years ago, I would have answered differently.
Okay.
So I liked a commission picking and the governor appointing. I thought that was a very good workaround from the first iteration that I learned under, which was the large convention of folks coming together in an auditorium, raising their hands, putting people forward, marching them across, having speeches, getting a coalition of people to agree on one person or two people to put forward to the governor and have them assign. So that first iteration didn't really work well for me. Second iteration, I even served on the school board nominating commission for 2 cycles. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great work. It was very, very humbling to listen to folks sit on this side of the desk and bear their thoughts and ideas out there and see how they go. Never did we get 11 people or 15 or 18 or you guys have been challenged with some pretty large groups of folks to interview, which is a wonderful problem to have. But as politics started to bubble into it over that last couple of years before we switched, and the minute it started drawing lawsuits on both sides, I said, okay, maybe it is time that we look at an elected school board. I sat with Pam Beidel for pieces. I testified for it at the legislative level. I think it was time that the community had a greater voice in it, whether that's perceived or whether it actually bubbles up and happens. So I'm kind of happy for it now, even though I did run in the primary and lose. That's just how it works, and that's you have to take the lumps with that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. I also have another question. You mentioned your advocacy earlier. Could you just tell me one thing that you're really, really proud of that you've advocated for over the years? I'm sure there's a lot, but just one thing that stands
my
out.
favorite one of
Okay.
all time is getting the retail sales tax repealed for PTAs doing fundraisers in the schools.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
Found that the legislature didn't really understand that schools actually paid retail tax. When you say we're a nonprofit organization, the first thing people think is, oh, they don't have to pay any taxes. And they don't realize that the state collects retail sales tax. So getting that pushed through and the collaborative effort of across the state PTAs coming to advocate and then working with all those legislators to get that, it was a lot of fun, and I'm very, very proud of that happening.
Well, I appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Anthony Liberatore. I'm the president of CRASC here at the Board of Ed. I wanted to thank you for your involvement in our county school system. It's nice to see that you were a student and then you were a parent and now you want to work for our county and you've been involved around our county. It's just admirable to see that you've been so involved here, particularly in our schools. My first question goes to your application when you mentioned your advocacy toward IB and AVID. I am an IB senior at Old Mill High School, so I wanted to thank you for that. I wanted to ask how you feel as though programs like IB, AVID, and any other programs that you didn't list that you've advocated for, how do you think they've improved the education quality here or life of students?
Tons. So my daughter was a C average student. Now she is the poster child for AVID, 100%. She went from a C average to an A average, got into the school of her choice. She's become a special ed teacher. Okay. Lord love her.
So
did not see that in her when she was as young, but she flew through it. My son, about 2 years of AVID, didn't think it was for him, and he's done okay. He's in community college. He's picked his path. I've learned with boys that you kind of have to relax. My daughter knew who she was going to be when she was 15. My son will know who he's going to be probably when he's 22 or 23, which is okay by me. You don't press that. You give them as much supports as you can put out there, and you pray that it all's going to work out.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is obviously, I think you were in here when I explained CRASC and whatnot in the past interview. Do you feel as though we as a county are doing enough to have the student voice here in Anne Arundel County and the Board of Education, or do you think we could do more? Do you have any suggestions? Or
Well, it's good that you have a superintendent's, council, student council for that. Being the only voting board in the United States that has a student member on it, awesome. You're heads and shoulders above most of the counties in Maryland. I think Montgomery County's probably running a close second to you.
Yeah, very, very close, but not all the way there.
You do tend to get recognized at the state level. I think it was Christian Hodges was the state student board member while I was the state PTA president, and he did us proud. But having your involvement in here the only way I can see to increase that is to start doing shadowing work, to start seeing from the administrative side, you know, being able to put in side commentary. You know, as a group, every student member on the board for the last 10 years has been exemplary. They've had great ideas. They've brought great things to the table. Being able to further that down chain is really a good task of how CRASC at the county level works and how they mirror that work. Okay. So I'm hoping that in the future you can bring more folks into these seats here during meetings and let them hear. But of course, if you do that in the daytime, you're going up against daytime meetings and school time.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Samantha Carter, and I'm with the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. I was curious what your thoughts were on the programs and the services available to students with disabilities and special needs within our county.
So we have a lumpy kind of reputation in this county. We do some things very, very well. I think, and I think you brought it up earlier tonight while I was watching on TV, and Bob hit on it with the military compact stuff. A lot of times folks come with special ed needs from other states or other jurisdictions in the military that have done an exemplary job of identifying the needs of that student. And we're more perfunctionary, I think, in Anne Arundel County, where we don't recognize things that military institutions take for granted in an IEP. We tend to hold the line on what's actually funded. And it becomes a struggle between parents who are advocating, very rightly so, for their children to get everything that they deserve and need more than deserve, and what can be functionally funded. I think we have to do a better job as a Board of Education, but more as a school system, to put the right tools in place, even if we have to shift them and share them between schools, to bring the needs to the forefront of those students. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. And I had one more question for you. So as discussed, you have extensive experience with the PTA through various capacities. How can the PTA work together with schools and families to promote inclusion and social skills for students with special needs?
You have to demonstrate it. A lot of times I've gone to struggling PTAs. I went to one on the Eastern Shore once over in Rock Hall, and they were struggling to get parents to volunteer to be, it was one of those, we were going to have to shut them down if they couldn't get folks to step up and be the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. And I asked a few simple questions before I went over there. I was like, okay, so how do you normally get people to come to your meetings? And you know, they were like, well, we just put the sign up, we send that thing home in the backpacks. I said, have you ever thought about bringing, you know, half a dozen pizzas and inviting them to bring their children with them, having somebody monitor the playground, let them play outside while you guys have and conduct a meeting and do your business? And, you know, just because somebody had never thought of it. And it worked really well. You have to do the same kind of thing. The problem with special education parents in particular are, you're already pulled 60 ways to China to begin with. Your time is this small. We're trying to start one up at Ruth Ethan. And, you know, those parents are very, very critically involved in the school, but they don't necessarily have time for the minutia of a PTA meeting every time. So you have to teach the parents that are there in those school environments what those needs are first. And the same thing you'd have to do with Hispanic parents on the other side. You have to reach out to them and teach them what they are so that you could find out how you can benefit them, because you can't advocate for something if you don't know what it is.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good evening. I am Susanna Kipke. I'm the other county executive appointee. You mentioned in your application about looking to make students safer and schools safer. Do you have any specific steps in mind or certain things you'd like to see happen to make schools and students safer?
So I'd like to see us take the training for active shooter a little bit further. I know we do a good job of lockdown training and getting out of the building training for fires. And I know it's not the easiest, most palatable thing to do, but we need to start giving our children the life skills to know what to do when the worst case scenario happens, so that their first reaction isn't panic, isn't, you know, they have to have a set of structure that says, this is what I'm going to do if this happens. And they have to practice it a couple of times so that it's rote to them. So it's not, you know, what did they say? You know, if I had to do CPR right now, I'd have to think it through. I've done it. I've been certified a couple of times. I know the basics, but I would have to sit there and think for a second. Well, when you've got somebody walking into a building doing something unsafe, whether it be a gun or whatever, that's not the first thing that's going to run into a child's mind. A lot of times they're going to pick up the phone, call mom or dad and say, hey, there's something going on. I don't feel safe. There has to be that avoid, defend, well, what is it? It's ADD. I can't remember all the acronyms all of a sudden. But they have to know the acronyms. They have to be able to do that. So 10 years ago, I was working for Borders Books over in Annapolis Mall when that shooting occurred over there. And what struck me from that was the herd of humanity that came through the food court, through what's now Forever 21, from one end of the building to the other, and just there was no care for what was in front of them. They were just getting out of the food court as fast as they could. And that's avoiding. That next step in that were the people who were frozen in place, standing in the food court going, what do I do next? What do I do? Luckily, the shooter and the FBI agent that was involved had both moved out toward one end of the building and had gone out. In my brain, all I did was count shots. I knew that there were 8 or 9. I was like, that's pretty much a clip. We're okay. You know, let me go out there and start pulling people in and figuring out what's going on. If we can't give them the basics of how to be safe from like middle school on, we're doing them a disservice. You know, they got to be able to react in a movie theater. They got to be able to react in the food court of the mall. They got to be able to react when they're at a big event, and they got to be able to react when they're in school.
That was the last question, so thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You guys
Thanks
have a great
for
evening.
accommodating our early schedule.
No worries. I hope your next one shows up.
Thank you.
Chairman Kipke, Ms. McQuaid has been in contact with us. She has a sick child.
Oh, no.
And cannot be here tonight and has asked to be rescheduled for Thursday,
Okay.
so we'll take care of that. So that would end your interviews for this evening.
Okay. Thank you. I thought we were about to interview you.
No.
You sure? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Opposed?